Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of Masters Assembly. I'd like to say g'day to International Masters Assembly, coming to you here from the Silicon Valley, the heart of California. My name is John Fung. I've recently been appointed Chief Revenue Officer for Domain. I want to take this opportunity to share some key themes for America and particularly Silicon Valley. So I'd like to walk you today's topic, emerging US trends impacting real estate. It's my great pleasure to introduce Andy Wong. For those of you who haven't met Andy Wong, not only is he a great guy, he's one of the top performing real estate agents in Silicon Valley, in California, and all of America. In fact, last year, during the pandemic, Andy ranked number 89 in California, which is the largest real estate market in America. There are 500,000 real estate agents in California. So Andy's not just top 1%, top 0.1%. He's actually close to the 0.01% agents in all of California and America. And so I'm really thrilled to have a chat with you, Andy, today. Welcome to Masters Assembly.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So let's kickstart our episode and hear all about you. How did you start off in real estate?
So believe it or not, it was actually right after 9/11.
Wow.
That had a profound impact on me. At the time, I was working in high tech, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was very fulfilling. But then I also remember, watching on TV the towers go down, and we were nowhere near Manhattan. But it just hit me so hard, and I thought to myself, what if I had been in one of those towers that day, and today was my last day on this side of heaven? What would I have left behind, and how would people remember me? And I took a lot of time off to do some soul searching, and I came to the conclusion that I really wanted to pursue a vocation that was more community-centric, much more relational.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually left high tech and embarked on a career in real estate.
That is fantastic. So talk to us about, you made that decision. What were the first steps you took? How did you go from there to being one of America's top real estate agents?
Well, I didn't intend to be, that was never the goal, to be, one of America's top agents. My goals were to, serve my community, connect with people deeply, and, honestly just provide for my family.
Wow. Well, that's a great story, Andy. So you have achieved some pretty incredible success. Maybe just give us a bit of a view behind the curtain. What are the key motivators that drive you, and how do you keep yourself and your team accountable?
So I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and through the ups and downs, including, going through the Great Recession, in 2008 and 2009, the thing that I think keeps me going day to day is I feel a sense of purpose and calling. Like, this is what I was meant to do. And, it's not about the money. It's not about, becoming famous or anything like that, but it's really about serving my community and taking care of clients. And that's what keeps me going.
Right. Well, you do an extremely good job of that, I can attest. So let's pivot a bit and talk a bit about the last few years. So no one could have predicted what the last 2 years looked like, with COVID and the recovery from COVID. Can you talk about, maybe with a view to the hyperlocal market well, Silicon Valley, what are the main themes that you've seen emerge due to significant disruption that we have all experienced in the past few years?
Yeah. So if you had asked me back in March of 2020, what was going to happen, I wouldn't have much of an answer for you, because honestly, the market came to a screeching halt. Everybody was living in fear. They were afraid to go out of their house, to go grocery shopping, let alone buy homes. We didn't know what was going to happen. And then we started seeing some signs of recovery in April and May. And by the summer, the market came roaring back. And we were just all amazed that there was so much demand for homes.
Yeah.
And so, if we look at the economics of this cycle, we look at the supply and demand side of things. From a demand perspective, it was fueled by extremely high liquidity. In our market, most of the buyers, or many of the buyers, work for companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and other high-tech companies.
Yeah.
And those companies compensate their employees with very generous stock packages. And those stock packages become very lucrative over a period of 4 years when they vest. So our buyers in this market are basically using their company stock and cashing it in to buy homes in this market. And the trend that we saw is that people wanted to get away from high density. They wanted to get out of condos and townhouses and apartments. We saw a lot of people moving down from San Francisco into the Silicon Valley area, where you get a little more land and bigger homes. And so the combination of the high liquidity, the type of housing product that we have here, and also, low interest rates. The government dropped interest rates to historic lows,
Yeah.
and buyers were anxious to take advantage of that by locking in low rates. On the supply side, it was very constrained. There was lots of discussion about, or lots of media coverage about people leaving the Bay Area, and selling their home to get out of the Bay Area. And it's true, I helped a lot of people leave the area. However, for every one person who left the area, there were 9 others who were already living here that wanted that house badly.
Yeah. I think a lot of our Australian listeners, particularly those in Sydney and Melbourne, see a lot of parallels between what's happening in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, New York, places like that. So just to double click a little more on some of those themes. So, this is what you're seeing, that in fact, COVID leads to not the great exodus, but a whole lot of people trying to come in. Talk about, how did you manage that disruption? How did you make the most of it for your clients and the business you're trying to build?
So what was interesting is, there was this huge paranoia or fear that, and there was a wide spectrum. Some people were very scared and some people were sort of scared. And, we had to adjust and pivot to understand what people were comfortable doing. So we pivoted to embrace as many online tools as possible to allow people who, were afraid to come out and look at homes. We made it very easy for them to experience the house online. For many years, we've been doing property videos to show off the house. So we really, we doubled down on that. We also embraced tools like creating 3D models of the house so that prospective buyers, they're basically looking for homes in their pajamas at 10 o'clock at night, after the kids have gone to bed. So we allow them to walk through the house at their own pace and as if they were at an open house.
Yeah.
And, we know that people aren't, there's no buy now button on the website. So the whole goal of these marketing tools is to convince a prospective buyer that it's worth their time and their effort and frankly, their hassle to come out and look at a house in person to see if this might be a good fit for them.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't seen Andy's websites and Andy's videos, they're quite captivating. He's done a really nice job of really personalizing the house and helping prospective buyers try and see, okay, what might it be like for me and my family to kind of move in here?
Yeah. And the thing to understand is, like, having a good property website is nice, but if nobody's looking at it, then it's not particularly effective or useful. So we leaned in heavily on online marketing and social media marketing to drive traffic to those websites as well.
Do you, just on the topic of social media online marketing, obviously most real estate agents are trying to lean into that right now. Do you have any particular advice of how you chose which platform, how to think about the spending, how to think about the geographical reach that you might want to share with other agents out there?
That's a great question. I think it comes back to just classical marketing principles in terms of understanding who is your audience, what are their demographics, what are their interests, what are their habits, because social media allows you to sort of hone in on those types of attributes. The other thing is to understand is, what platform is your audience on, based on their preferences or their demographics. Are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? Are they on Pinterest? Are they on TikTok? What set of eyeballs do you want to target that are the most likely clients that you want to attract to that particular house?
So maybe we can bring that to life a little. Obviously, we exist in a certain kind of bubble in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of analogies to places like Sydney and Melbourne, that have these kind of premium markets, all these homes going for multi-millions of dollars. Maybe talk about who are the buyers that we should be targeting. Who are the ones where, whether you use TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or things like that. When you're building those marketing campaigns, who you're trying to get in front of to make sure they see the house that you're putting on the market.
So it's a very interesting balance, because here in the United States, we have very specific anti-discrimination laws where we cannot target certain attributes like ethnicity, race, religious preference, gender. It has to be fairly vanilla. And so from that perspective, although Facebook allows you to tweak those knobs and things like that, you have to be very careful about being in compliance and to not discriminate. And so that's why I think it's important to understand, the general platforms. So for example, certain audiences have more affinity towards Facebook for one reason or another. Other audiences have more affinity to Instagram or Pinterest or TikTok or Snapchat. So you just have to understand within your specific market what type of people are attracted to different platforms.
Okay, okay.
And I would throw Twitter and LinkedIn in that as well, because I think those are very viable platforms. I didn't mean to exclude anybody there.
So in Silicon Valley then, obviously with reference to those platforms, who are the classic buyers, of a Silicon Valley house?
So in the market that I serve, it's characterized by extremely good public schools and extremely strong communities. And so typically the types of buyers who are attracted to those markets tend to be families with young kids, because they want to enroll their kids into the public schools and have them go through the entire system and then go to college from there.
Based on some of the trends that you've spoken about, the move into the suburbs, the desire, for quality, do you anticipate, at least in our area in Silicon Valley, will these accelerate? Will these pivot? What's your crystal ball telling you?
One of the things that has been true for decades about Silicon Valley real estate is there's really only a finite number of homes. Our area it's not unlike Manhattan, where Manhattan's an island, we're a peninsula. There's only so much land, and by and large, it's been all developed. So there's no new large tracts of land to build a whole new neighborhood or tract of homes. So that constrains the supply dramatically. And then we narrow it down even more, where some buyers are very specific and they'll say, I only want to live in these specific communities, like say Los Altos, Palo Alto, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, or whatever, that they want those particular neighborhoods, and they're willing to pay a premium to be there because they place such a high value there.
So Andy was very humble in his intro. He's actually a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, which is one of the top technology schools in the country. You can see, if you get a chance to check out his website, he's a keen student of technology and uses a lot of the fun things that bring that to life. So Andy, what are the most significant technology trends that you've seen? And talk about how they've impacted you and your business.
So that's a really interesting question, because back when I first started almost 20 years ago, the internet was just starting to emerge as a dominant technology for real estate. And honestly, a lot of the veteran agents were kind of intimidated because they were afraid that they were going to be displaced by technology, not unlike the way stockbrokers were displaced by online trading. And so back then we would drive clients around for 4 or 5 hours and show them a whole slew of homes all around town. And these days our clients really don't have time for that. They're so busy that they're working, they're doing stuff with their kids, and so they love the idea that all this information is online for them. And so they look at the homes on the internet, and then they pick out a handful of homes that pique their interest, and then we go look at those specific homes, and we squeeze in the showings on the weekends between birthday parties and soccer games. And so then the question becomes, well, what is the value of the agent? And over time, the value of the agent has shifted from being an Uber driver to a trusted advisor. Yeah. And so, when we're evaluating homes, there's a lot of data available online. We love it when the buyers do research and, they're digging deep, and we have very informed conversations about value of the home, the neighborhoods, and everything else. And as much information as available, it just enriches the analysis. Because many of our buyers, because of where we live, they're highly analytical. Yeah. And so they love to get into the data. But what I've seen is that no matter how analytical the buyers might be, at the end of the day, they're making gut decisions. They're going to look at the data, and then at the end of the day, they have to decide, is this the right house for me and my family? Do my partner and I agree on that this is the right house for our family? And, is this where I can imagine living for the next 3 to 30 years. Yeah. And again, to put things in perspective, they're making a multi-million-dollar decision. Yeah. And this is not something they do, for a house, maybe 2, 3, 4 times in their entire lifetime. Yeah. So there's a real gut check whenever somebody decides, I want to make an offer on this house or not.
No, that's a great way of putting it, Andy. And I've appreciated you being part of my own journey, for that. I think it's interesting you talk about the trends and how data and AI is kind of being used in a greater sense for both buyers and sellers. Maybe we can talk about how folks would use some of those trends, not just in Silicon Valley, but for our viewers around the world? How can they take your approach and implement it in their local markets?
So what's interesting is, let's just take like Zillow, for example.
Yeah.
When Zillow came on, they were the only website that was offering, an estimated value. And everybody loved it because they all thought like, it's sort of like watching a stock market where you see the value of your house go up and down, and hopefully, trending upwards. And people sort of believed that that was the value of their home without actually looking at any comparable sales in their neighborhood. What's interesting is other websites have now gone into that business where they're offering home valuations. And there's probably 3 or 4 big websites that are doing that here in the United States, and their numbers don't always match. In fact, usually, they don't. And so the consumer is left with the question of like, which number is right? Which website is right? If you're a seller, you like the number that's highest. If you're a buyer, you like the website that gives you the lowest number. And again, this is the value of the agent, where they can come in and help really explain the dynamics of how homes are being valued, what other buyers that you might, in our market, everything right now everything is multiple offers. So you're competing against other buyers. So they bring in sort of like the latest information of what happened the week before. Like let's say, for example, there was another house in the neighborhood and there were 6 offers on that one. They'll have the knowledge of, okay, that's how competitive it is in this market at this particular time. So if we're representing the buyer, we want to factor that in and make a winning offer without totally, ridiculously overpaying for that house.
Andy, you spoke a lot about how you advocate for buyers, and it's interesting in America. It's very commonplace to have a buyer's agent, and that trend is actually picking up in other parts of the world, such as Australia, but hasn't quite caught on yet. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could talk a little about when you're representing the seller. What are the things that you try and do to kind of make sure they get the most out of the transaction?
So if you're hiring a seller's agent to represent you as the seller, you really want to hire a hyper-local expert, someone who knows the ins and outs of your neighborhood, and ideally someone who actually lives in your neighborhood, kind of like where we met. And so, any agent you hire can say this is a nice neighborhood, the schools are good, and it's a nice house. But when the agent who represents the seller actually lives there and has experienced all the wonderful things about living in that neighborhood and knows all the ins and outs of it, it just conveys more value to prospective buyers. And they have actual firsthand data to support why this particular neighborhood, this particular home, is justified by paying a premium.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, when we bought our first home from you, it was pretty amazing to know that you were literally down the road, that you were going to send your kids, or you were sending your kids the same schools that our kids might have gone to, that you had known the person who's selling, and in this case, you knew the person who was buying. So it was a very, very different experience. And it's very interesting when I think about the Australian market, where I'm moving back to Sydney's North Shore, and also a lot of the more premium parts of Melbourne, which is another very big market for us. You really get that hyper-local leadership where people can say, yeah, I could choose from 100 agents, but I want the one who's in my neighborhood. I want the one who's been there for decades. I want the one whose kids are going to the schools that my kids are going to go to. So right. I think it's testament to kind of all premium markets. Because obviously your business, your reputation continues to grow. There is more work that you could do than you could ever, have time for. How do you maintain your personal environment and your energy as your business and your demand grows?
Honestly, the last 20 months has been, it's felt like a constant sprint with no breaks, because the market was just been so active and so many clients have been reaching out to ask for help. And so, I think going into the new year, I want to be a little bit more intentional about having a little bit more balance between work and family and also personal care going forward.
Do you want to give our viewers a preview into some of the things that you're going to try and do in 2022 to kind of protect your personal environment and energy?
So going forward in 2022, who knows what the future is going to bring? I mean, if anything, we've learned that nothing can be, the same.
Expect the unexpected.
Expect the unexpected, right? Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. But I think the thing that the constant remains is, just my personal philosophy of loving your neighbor.
Yeah.
And I just happen to have a very literal interpretation of neighbor. It's like literally the people who live in my general vicinity. And so, it's, when I started off, I kind of modeled my practice after being like kind of a country doctor, where I literally have a neighbor who lives in our neighborhood, and he's a great orthopedic surgeon. And so whenever, someone breaks their arm or one of their kids breaks their arm, they always go to him, and he patches them back together and puts and gets them back going again. But he's also just a great friend. He's the father of one of my daughter's best friends, and I've known him for years, and I just enjoy his friendship.
Yeah.
And so, knock on wood, I've never had to go and see him because I broke something, but he's just a great friend to have. And so I kind of want to be that in the same thing where, I have a very valuable skill set in terms of real estate. And when people have questions and they need help, I can apply those skills. And if not, then, we just sort of live together in community as neighbors.
Well, Andy, as your literal neighbor, I can absolutely attest to the power of your philosophy. I think if you picked a random one of our 1,000 neighbors in our neighborhood and said, what do you think of when you think about Andy Long? They'd probably say, yeah, this is a loving guy who truly loves his neighbors and wants to serve them, whether it's in business, whether it's in family or otherwise. So I think, Andy, you do an amazing job of that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Maybe last question for you. You can leave with our viewers. What are the 3 most important lessons that you have learned throughout your life journey?
I think the past couple of years have made everybody sort of rethink what their priorities are. And, for me, I think, so one is time is precious. We only have a limited amount of time here on this side of heaven. And, it's the interactions and the relationships that we form with people that have, a lasting impact through time. Number 2 is balance. We talked a little bit about that, just, managing the balance between work life, family life, and just personal care. And the third is, if I've learned nothing from this whole COVID thing, is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things about COVID is, it was really hard to establish any kind of consistent rhythm. Once we start feeling like, okay, I sort of understand how the way things are going to work going forward, then everything gets disrupted again. And then you get used to that, and then it gets all disrupted again. And so, I think it's just remaining flexible and embracing the adventure and seeing where that leads.
Well, Andy, it has been great to get to know your adventure, an amazing life that you've lived, had a huge impact on so many people, including myself. So thank you for giving us some of your precious time, today. We really wish you well, and very excited for the personal and professional journey ahead of you for 2022. And to each of you watching, thank you so much for joining us, at Master Assembly. We're out of time. Thanks for joining our special American International Edition. Hope you have a great week, and thank you for watching.